7 subscribers. I want to play a game. Hey everyone, it's Ben. So as you guys probably have guessed, today's video is going to be on the Saw franchise, and I'm surprised I haven't done this before now, but here it is. I got 7 films to cover, and hopefully I can do it in a couple videos, but we'll see. And again, thanks everyone for watching. So the Saw franchise, I think next to Friday the 13th, Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street, is one of the most successful horror franchises in history. It was a tradition for my brother-in-law and I to go see these every time they were released in October. It was kind of a bittersweet conclusion when Saw 7 was released a little over a year and a half ago, because I really enjoyed the franchise, and I thought it had great continuity and really interesting characters. And you know, it's sad when a series comes out that you really connect with and then it ends before I felt like it was time to. I was one of the people that looked forward to more Saw films. The original Saw film was directed by James Wan, and it appeared in multiplexes in October of 2004, just in time for Halloween, and proceeded to reinvent the horror movie scene that was still looking for to regain its foothold after the conclusion of the Scream-type horror films that had peaked and dried up with the release of Scream 3 in 2000. Saw was shot on a shoestring budget of $1,200,000. Its opening weekend gross of over $18 million was huge and proved that the next big horror franchise was upon us. The film would eventually gross over $55 million, which is huge given its small budget. Lionsgate greenlit a sequel almost as soon as the numbers for the film came down, and for the next 6 years we would have a new film in the franchise for Halloween, until Paranormal Activity crept in 2009 to take on the mighty Saw franchise. Since I'm such a big fan of the series, I will give my ratings for the 7 films in the Saw franchise. For those of you who have not seen all the films, please be advised that there will be some spoilers in my critiques. So the original Saw opened in October of 2004. The basic synopsis of this film is that 2 wake up in the secure lair of a serial killer who's been nicknamed Jigsaw. The men must follow various rules and objectives if they wish to survive and win the deadly game set for them. When I first heard of the film and saw the initial trailers, I thought the film looked to be in the vein of Silence of the Lambs or Seven. I thought the concept of a serial killer approach taken from the Jigsaw character was unique, that he was someone that did not kill his victims but put them through tests to prove that life should not be taken for granted. The film is very disturbing and has several images that are hard to shake from your head. The ones that come to mind are the reverse bear trap and the razor wire maze. But it's also a well put together thriller and does not rely heavily on gore and offers some real tense moments. The cast is amazing. You have Danny Glover as Detective Tapp, Shawnee Smith as Amanda, and the great Cary Elwes as Dr. Gordon, who is the heart and soul of the film. Dr. Gordon is a very complex character in that you don't really like him when he first appears in the film, because he is not the most moral individual. But by the end of the film, you can't help but empathize with him. The proceedings culminate in an ending that I still think is one of the most shocking and unexpected I have seen in. Now from here we move on to Saw 2. Which would come out the following year. The synopsis for this film is that Jigsaw locks a few unlucky people in a booby-trapped shelter, and they must find a way out before they inhale too much of a lethal nerve gas and die. But they must watch out, for the traps Jigsaw has set in the shelter lead to death also. Now, Darren Lynn Bousman would actually direct Saw 2, and he would also stay on to direct Saws 3 and 4. When it was announced that there would be a sequel to Saw and that the film would be released the following year, I was curious where the story would go in a sequel and if it would suffer from the quick turnover. Well, I was happy that the second film was even better than the first film, and I think the impact it had on me officially made me a fan of the series and an advocate for further installments of the Jigsaw legend. The film did up the ante with several participants in Jigsaw's latest game, and also gave us a slam-bang performance by Donnie Wahlberg as Detective Mason, who I think is just as good an actor as his brother. Shawnee Smith and Dina Meyer also returned to their respective roles of Amanda and Carrie, and are given more to do, particularly Shawnee, who has multiple layers with Amanda this time around. Finally, you have the amazing Tobin Bell as Jigsaw, and the man owns in every single frame. The scenes between him and Wahlberg's character are awesome and really show the versatility of both actors. The traps in this one are much more grisly, and while the first film was relatively bloodless, this one ups the ante big time on the gore. The most cringeworthy traps involve a pit full of needles and a death's head mask. A year later, we would have Saw 3. Three is that Jigsaw kidnaps a doctor to keep him alive while he watches his new apprentice put an unlucky citizen through a brutal test. I was really looking forward to this third installment of the series, and the main reason for this was how much I really enjoyed Saw 2. The third film harkens back more to the intimate setting of the first film in the series. The main participants in this installment are Lynn, played by Bahar Samik, a doctor who is kidnapped and forced to keep Jigsaw, who is dying from cancer, alive. And at the same time, Jeff, played by Angus McFadden, is being put through a new Jigsaw test that forces him to confront his inner demons brought on by the death of his son. Samik and McFadden do adequate jobs in the film, but I had a hard time warming up to their characters, and I think that was why this film did not rate as high for me. On the plus side, Tobin Bell and Shawnee Smith own as Jigsaw and Amanda, and they again bring their A-games to this film. Also, it is important to note that this film marked the first appearances of Mark Hoffman, played by Costas Mandylor, and Betsy Russell as Jill Tuck, who would go on to provide pivotal roles in the upcoming films. The traps in this one take disgusting and fucked up to new levels. The rack has to be one of the most cringeworthy traps in the entire franchise, and one that still pains me to watch. The ending for this film could have closed the series out, although there were still some unanswered questions that I am glad the subsequent sequels provided answers to. But those points aside, I was on the side of many fans of the franchise at the time and felt that 3 should have capped the series. For the filmmakers to continue the story after the conclusion of Saw 3 was a strange concept for me to grasp. On one hand, I wanted to see more films in the series, but when you take away the main antagonist, where do you take the story without destroying the groundwork structure-wise? This also marked the exit of screenwriter Leigh Whannell. He remained a producer along with James Wan on the remaining films in the series, who had been responsible for writing the first 3 films. Screenwriters Marcus Duncan and Patrick Melton took the reins from Whannell, and things were a little rough for me out of the gate. That does not mean I hate the film. I do like it. It just doesn't have the flow as well for me as the first 3 had, and I do think it gets better as the film moves towards its conclusion. The story focuses on who John Kramer, Jigsaw, was, now that the world knows that he was the Jigsaw killer. The film begins with Jigsaw's autopsy, and over the course of the proceedings they find a small tape in his stomach. John poured wax over the tape and swallowed it before he met his maker in Saw 3. Enter Detective Hoffman, who was briefly introduced in the previous film. Upon listening to the tape, he discovers that even in death, Jigsaw's reign of terror will live on, and at the same time a new game is in motion, that this time involving Lieutenant Rigg, who had a small role in both Saw 2 and Saw 3. I think the fact that Rigg was not that interesting of a character in the previous films kept me from being interested in him out of the gate in this installment. He was kind of one note in the previous films, and here he is played completely different, more compassionate, and I don't fault it with Lyric Bent, the actor playing the character. It just was the way the part was written this time around. To be fair, as the story proceeds, I did come to appreciate the character more. I was just not with him in the beginning. The other storyline involves Jill Tuck, Jigsaw's widow, played by Betsy Russell, who is being investigated by Agent Strom, Scott Patterson, and Agent Perez, and Althea Karkanis. for her husband's crimes. This was the most interesting aspect of the film for me, as it led to flashback scenes involving Jill and John and shows what ended up pushing him over the edge. The traps in this one are not as memorable as the previous films either, the best thing being the one in the climax of the film that I will not give away. The most cringeworthy scene is the autopsy scene. The big question this movie proposes is who will be John's successor. The ending to the film and the final reel are pretty awesome, and again, I have to give it to the filmmakers. It was a move I did not see coming. All in all, a good film, but it turned out to be my least favorite in the series.